Welcome everybody to Masters of Real Estate. Today I have a treat. Sean O'Toole here with Property Radar that has been in the industry, the real estate industry for years now, and has really unique knowledge base on economics, on data, and really helping people with different tools to invest in real estate. Actually, he's been a part of the I Survived Real Estate event for years, helping raise a ton of money for cancer patients, for children, and things like that. And you know, one of the ways we met was out in the real estate community and at these types of events to, you know, be able to help the community. And it's really impressive to be involved in these types of, you know, entrepreneurship activities where you get to make money and at the same time, you know, help people at the same time. And you know, Sean has been a great supporter of that. And so welcome, Sean. Thanks so much for joining. I really appreciate the time today. Can you give a little background on your experience and what you started in real estate, or how you started, man?
Well, I started after the tech bubble. I had three startups back in Silicon Valley in the 90s that I was part of, and did really well until we went to file our S1 to go public in March of 2000, right as the markets crashed. And that and a couple of other experiences made me a student of economics. But after that crash, I ended up flipping 160 homes, kind of 2002
Awesome.
to 2006, and got out of the market or started to get out of the market at the end of 2005, beginning of 2006, which was good timing before the crash.
Did Bruce give you that knowledge base to get out at that time, or were you looking at the data yourself?
I was looking at the data myself. I didn't know Bruce at that time, but
Okay.
he saved a lot of folks, and you know, I unfortunately kind of kept it to myself. I didn't go out and tell the world like Bruce did. So kudos to him for saving so many folks.
For
And
sure.
so yeah, you know, and then I was already collecting data on all the foreclosures in California. After I made $1 million on a Taco Bell, I wanted to stop flipping single-family homes and start flipping commercial deals. So I
Nice.
was tracking everything, and decided to make that data available, especially as it started to go crazy in 2007 with the launch of Foreclosure Radar, and later on I expanded that to cover all properties and all kinds of events, not just foreclosures.
That's great, man. I mean, you know, the data piece of it and the economics piece of it is absolutely key. I graduated with a degree in economics with an emphasis in accounting, and really didn't know anything about economics until the entire market crash in 2008. And I was like 7 and 8, and I was like, now I need to learn economics, you know. So I was like, oh, this is important. No, I see why, you know. And you learn the lessons the hard way until you get that wake up call. You're like, okay, I need to be a student now to this and really pay attention to the data. And then you realize there's a lot of bad data out there and news media that isn't true. And, you know, by doing a deeper dive into that data is where you see the true picture about what's actually occurring in the economy as a whole. And so when you started this, you know, back, what year was it? It was 2000 what?
2007 we originally launched as Foreclosure.
2007. So that was the start of, you know, a major run up of a massive amount of foreclosures. And so what were the primary data metrics that you were focused on at that time? Because I know a lot of people right now, you know, we have totally different environment right now with the economy compared to what was occurring there with really bad lending. It's starting to have some bad lending techniques is what I'm seeing, but I'm not seeing it as anywhere near as bad. But, you know, people are looking at this saying, hey, there could be some volatility in the market that it could occur. There could be some, you know, changes in distress out there. And so what warning signs and, you know, data were you tracking that kind of gave you that underlying understanding of where the market might be going?
Yeah, you know, it's always a combination of things. One thing I like to remind people is that economics is a bachelor of arts, not a bachelor of science, right?
For sure.
And the end of the day is there's too many data points, right, to really build any kind of accurate economic model. So
Hmm.
this combination of data and gut and anecdotal evidence that you have to use to come to conclusions. So the data I saw at the time were a slight uptick at the end of '05, an uptick in foreclosures, slight still, big increase in inventory. We're starting, not a big increase, an increase in inventory and a decline in sales volume. which, you know, you could say we have similar kind of conditions today. The other thing that I think, though, is really important on economics is to understand we don't live in a free market economy. Nowhere in the world is really a free market
Right.
economy. And so the regulatory framework at that time was that if you had a bad asset, in other words, a mortgage on which somebody's not making a payment, your job as a bank, the regulators required you to get the bad asset off your books as fast as possible. And in hindsight, that's really clear is what caused this huge decline because we had a few people starting to default and they put those back on the market. They realized they made some mistakes in lending. They tightened up lending. So now you're putting more properties, more inventory in the market. At the same time, you're taking loans away, and that caused a real problem. And those banks had to keep dropping the prices till they sold. We don't have that same kind of confluence of events because in
Hmm.
2009 the regulators figured out, geez, we don't want to force these folks to get bad assets off their books as fast as possible. We want to force them to keep homeowners in their homes as long as possible. That's what we want to do as a regulatory framework.
Hmm.
So we're in a very different environment now, though the conditions are similar, you know, terrible affordability, lower sales, increasing inventories. You know, it's not a great picture. There's just
Hmm.
not that distressed seller in the market right now that's going to cause huge price declines.
Yeah, I agree with all that, and I'm curious as to how you're seeing that increase in inventory. I mean, right now I've seen it increase from, bottoming out, but it's still crazy low compared to what historical averages. And, maybe it's upticking in that, negative direction, but I would say, if anything, we need more inventory to make a more even market because it's a broken market right now. You don't have any affordability, but then you don't have any product either. And so if you have a good house that's priced right, that thing is going to move quick versus, hey, maybe if people are, there's some problems with it or, issues, then of course there might be some pushback. It might go a little slower because the affordability is squeezed so much. So those good houses are going to be packed up and, and taken up. But also it's very market dependent, right? You're looking at a lot of California data as well. And I know realtors and people like that are struggling out there right now with the lack of transaction volume and, lenders are struggling and stuff like that as well. I guess the government didn't realize that, hey, how there's going to be other effects to them adjusting interest rate and I'll say pretending to fight inflation by keeping the rates higher when they're really behind the doors over here, still releasing the levers to the banks, allowing them to, continue to flood the market with additional capital for the banks, behind the scenes. It seems like that, and politics and real estate seem to be connected at every level, just like you were talking about. And what are you seeing now as far as, the incentives for the governments based on where we might be going? I know that's a tough question to answer, and, I'm not trying to get into crazy conspiracy theories, even though I got a bunch of water barrels and food for 6 months and I'm a prepper and total conspiracy theorist. But at the same time, like, yeah, I'm just curious as to what your thoughts are and what you're seeing based on the data out there now and what cracks in the system may be coming and based on incentives, what we're seeing for the government side.
You know, it's a big question with
Yeah,
a
sorry.
very long answer. I'll try to keep it brief. You know, I think the still the number one thing, even though we've made some progress on it over the last year or two, is still inflation, right? This confluence of, and this isn't a political statement. Like, I don't care left, right, where you are. I'm solidly neither left or right. Um, People will say, "Oh,
Ditto.
you're a moderate," and I go, "No, no, no. My views aren't moderate. They just don't align with either of those two." So, um, but we made a mistake in 2016 with tax cuts when we already had a pretty strong economy, right? That's inflationary. Then we added tariffs, both under Trump and under Biden. Trump really
Hmm.
increased the the tariffs on China.
Right.
This whole, make America great again, bring manufacturing back here again is super inflationary, as a policy that both parties seem to be, glomming onto a bit. But, you want to make a TV in the US, that TV you bought at Costco for $300 is now going to be $3,000. And
Right.
so as we move that direction, maybe the right thing to do for a country, but nobody's communicating the impact that that move is going to have, and then we shut off supply under Trump and kept it shut off under Biden with super inflationary when you take away supply and you still have demand.
Right.
And you know through every crisis we throw money at the crisis to reflate the economy and keep it from having too bad of an impact. But here we threw money at it, which in without those other things, I think would have been fine and wouldn't have been inflationary. It's not just that,
Right.
but combined with all those other factors, really put us in an inflationary environment, and that has had big impacts on interest rates and the rest. So, I think that's still the biggest issue. I know a lot of people think the Fed, shouldn't have gone up as much as they did. I think they should have gone up more and earlier
Hmm.
and really kicked the thing, which would have hurt the economy and would have hurt it quite a while back. But I think would have left us in a better position than we find ourselves in today. And I think the real risk now, and you know, certainly, more tax cuts or, artificially lowering interest rates or some of the things that,
The
have been
government could do. Right.
the government could do, I think could make things a lot worse and put us into stagflation, which is kind of what I see as the worst of all possibilities. And, I think the real concern now is getting through this without losing our status as the world's reserve currency. Because the world's reserve currency is why people go, oh, the rates are terrible right now. No, they're not. Compare our rates worldwide, we still have pretty damn good rates.
Right.
We have pretty damn good rates because we're the world's reserve currency. You go screw with that by screwing with the Fed and those things, and you'll find out what ugly rates look like. Um,
Yeah, and I
you know,
think that we have the best terms and structures as well, worldwide. You don't see 30-year mortgages and things like that in other countries a lot, from what I see. So,
outside of Japan, who has much worse debt than we have, yet
right.
they have better terms on their mortgages and lower rates. So yeah, the one example where it's actually better, they're in worse shape financially than we are as a country.
And I look at this inflation issue as one of the obviously the one of the biggest issues that is arising right now, of course, and I think it's a lot worse than people think, right? You see food prices going through the roof massively, and a lot of times when you're qualifying for financing, you're qualifying for a rent and things like that. Those types of costs are not considered in your debt to income ratio, and they've gone up so much that people's true affordability has been squeezed even more. So at what point is it to where, hey, rents start to drop because they can't afford those things, and same thing with, or we see a massive spike in homelessness, and or a combination of households or innovation through tiny homes like you're seeing in California occur across the board, where people are
Yeah.
just squeezed into tighter spots on less land as well. I think all those things could take effect if the government would get out of the way and allow people to develop and do those things in the first place in California, depending on the city, right? So that's always another issue, is local governments and local, regulations and things like that to get through.
Let's just be clear. We've made building affordable housing illegal,
Yeah,
right?
pretty
Like,
much.
you can't build an affordable house anymore. You can't do, cheap siding. You can't do single pane windows. You can't do a 5-year roof. And let's face it, all the affordable housing we still have is that stuff that was built in the 70s and 80s that was shit houses, honestly.
Hmm.
But guess what? Those houses all get upgraded over time. They get stucco siding, they get dual pane windows, they get more efficient heaters. But
Hmm.
we've made it illegal to build that entry level home. You have to build like, that
A
upper
huge
middle
house.
home
Yeah.
now if you build any house at all.
It doesn't
And
pencil anymore. Yeah.
there's
So, and
nothing below
we've
that.
for our house, we added square footage, and we had to have, in order to hit their California energy requirements, we had to hit their like 98% efficiency tankless water heater that broke in a year. So we just went and bought a normal water heater afterwards. But like, you deal with these types of costs that as well from a regulatory standpoint, on top of the increase in materials, of course, and it becomes unaffordable.
they're well intended. I mean, I think ultimately we've got to address the climate and these things, but it's the road to hell is paved with good intentions, right?
Right. And
And
what do you see as far
hell
as
is
real estate
affordable
goes?
housing.
What do you see as far as real estate goes when it comes to the affordability aspect? From what I was saying, at what point does this start to tip? Because I think the last crash was what 17% affordability, and we've already we're lower than that, I believe now. Maybe I'm off a little bit, but
No, I think we're way lower. Yeah.
yeah, so I mean, if that's the case, and people are squeezed on the personal expense side of things outside of just housing, and there's no supply out there. Maybe it's growing a little bit, depending, and obviously rents and housing can be inverted, right? So you're looking at, if people can't afford a house, they get pushed into becoming a renter, maybe pushed into multifamily where rents rise in multifamily more, or tiny houses and things like that. But what where are we going? I mean, we're looking at jobs starting to take a hit to a degree as well. That's a giant factor. Do you think we're headed for
No,
another
I mean, they
2008
need.
type thing where they kick the can down the road?
Um, yeah. So there's a lot there to unpack. Like, so is affordability bad? Yes. Could it get a lot worse? I think it can. I mean, look at Hong Kong, where you're taking apartments and you have cage homes, right? So they're literally taking an apartment, they put 3 or 4 cages in each bedroom that, are individual living spaces and cost more than what one bedroom costs today in San Francisco, as an example, right? So can things get worse? Yes, they can get a lot worse still, and they are. I still like to compare versus other economies and across the world to see how we're
Hmm.
doing. And the fact is, we're doing great. Like, and you start looking at most economic metrics across the world. So, think we're going to change a president or something like that and get different results is nuts.
Insane.
Um,
Yeah.
but, you know, at the same time, what should we do? Listen, we don't have a functional government at this point. And
Period.
this is
Right.
why we keep coming back to the Fed to do things. And, every once in a while we'll line up where, the executive branch, the House and the Senate are all of the same party, and things actually happen. The rest of the time, we end up with two of the three, and we're just kind of in stalemate. And honestly, that stalemate isn't terrible. Like, I'd rather we stay in the stalemate than align either of our crazy parties to own of all three of those spaces and get, quote unquote, get things done, because it's never good.
To me,
Um,
it's a matter of like, which one are you going to let steal from us in one way, shape, or form? They just want to spend on different things and stuff. And if we had a fiscal responsibility tightening, call it like similar to the president of Argentina that I'm seeing, cut things, you're going to have a major crash in the meantime because everything else is going to come to a halt, and spending stops, and you got to reset. And that's really what would have
but
to occur to dial it
let's
in.
let's look at the last president that had the courage to do that, right? I would say that was Jimmy Carter, together with Paul Volcker. And they slammed the brakes on. They put interest rates through the roof, right? My parents had the misfortune of completing building their house and needing to take a loan that year. And they had their mortgage that they thought would be 8 or 9%, which they thought was a good rate, ended up being 18%. And fortunately, with help of my mom's parents, we made it through. They made it through, but barely, right? They almost lost, built their dream house, almost lost it. And, a lot of people will consider Jimmy Carter the worst president, ever. However, he did this major reset that really cleaned stuff up. And it set us up for 30 years, 40 years of, really overall pretty good times. And that's because rates kept ticking lower and lower. And as rates ticked lower and lower, debt could tip up, could keep creeping up, which kept growth, GDP growing. If you look at debt growth since the 70s and GDP growth, they're pretty much aligned. And, so the question is, where do we go from here? And, if we can get inflation, under control, then I think, yes, we can, rates will come back down, things will stabilize. I don't think we'll see a big correction in houses. We've got $82 trillion that's going to start transferring from boomers to their kids. So that's going to, for a lot of folks, going to help
It's
them
an
get through,
interesting stat. Yeah. And
you know,
what do you think about the population aspect of this? Thinking about demographics, I'm seeing a lot of other countries, China and other countries, massively their population is reducing significantly, and my understanding is the U.S. is still in good shape with regard to population growth and things like that. I'm curious as to, and maybe I'm off, but that's
not
the
on
last chart I saw.
birth rate, not on current birth rate, but yeah, the kind of the waves we have coming through. My generation, Gen X, is a little on the lower side, right? So than the boomers or the millennials after us. So and then I think Gen Z drops down again a bit, but relatively stable. But yeah, the demographics piece has a lot to do with this too. The other thing is, so 2008, we took away all these homes from people, right? We reduced inventory by a ton. We stopped building. Where'd they all go? They all just moved in with each other, right?
Yeah, the
Um,
combined households, which may happen again massively.
we saw, like I saw in Stockton, I get one family per bedroom in a four-bedroom house, four families living in a house. So there's lots of ways these things can go. This whole, oh, there's not enough units, people won't, they'll have to pay, whatever. I don't think that's true. They can combine households. On the other
I'm
hand,
seeing
they
that
have
too.
to live separate, and if they can, they will. So if they can find the financial will and way, they will. Bottom line is, it's super complex right now, and I think it's going to stay complex. I don't think I would buy right now, counting on lower rates. No matter which party wins this next election, I don't think I would count on that at all. And at the same time, if you can afford to buy today on your income and the rest, I think you're still better off being a homeowner, because over 30 years or over a long period of time, especially if you're going to stay at least five, it just works. It works out because you're fixing your rent for up to 30 years, right? No rent increases for 30 years.
Right. It's huge.
That's home ownership in the United States. No rent increases.
I talk about this quite a bit where I, look at the inflation that's occurring and stuff like that and think that, hey, there might be some short-term volatility in rents dropping because of distress and stuff like that, but long-term, those actual rents are going to continue to rise as wages rise with inflation over a period of time. Maybe not as much as inflation is occurring to a degree, but at the
Sometimes
same
more.
time, yeah, and the mortgage is your asset really at the end of the day. If interest rates, or I'm sorry, if you're looking at inflation rates of 10 plus in reality on a lot of stuff, and I don't see personally how inflation is going to come down, just because I see the debt, I see the liabilities that are on the that are coming, unless there's a major change politically that cuts a lot of that out somehow, which their incentive to kick the can down the road and inflate away the problems, and obviously I feel like at some point it's going to hurt our reserve currency. It already has massively. I just don't know at what point that's going to occur. But at the end of the day, you're looking at locking in this mortgage, and that mortgage being a real asset because it's increasing your wealth building effects long term on this, because you're at that fixed rate. Your cost of living is not rising because of that mortgage compared to everything else. And that concerns me from a investment standpoint as a real estate investor, looking at inflation and saying, hey, well, are my rents going to keep up with the increase in insurance and property taxes and repair costs and things like that that can occur, and if you're holding property long term? And that to me seems like one of the biggest inflation risks as a real estate investor. And so I think it's important to buffer yourself, put more money down and have less leverage, make sure you can deal with the volatility swings of rental rates and things like that, and rent increases and decreases in the meantime, so that you can hold assets long term and still take advantage of even current rates at around 7.5, where you can buy down in some cases, is not horrible. So
It's a valid concern. I mean, in California, we have the lowest rents in the nation.
yeah.
from a landlord's perspective, right? We get the least
Oh,
return on our
yeah,
capital.
comparatively to the values, right? Yeah.
You, I threw you there for a minute with the
I was like,
lowest rent in the nation. You thought I was being sarcastic. I'm not being sarcastic at all. We have the
I
lowest rent
definitely,
in the nation from a landlord's perspective, right? We have the worst returns
right.
on rent based on the current value of the property. But that has more to do with the fact of how fast property has increased in value here. So we
Hmm.
still haven't made out badly as landlords because the value of property's gone up much better generally than the rest of the nation. So usually it still makes sense to be a landlord getting terrible rent, cap rate, ROI on your property. It would be nice if the California legislature realized, and just the public in general realized, that the California rents are the lowest in the nation versus value. The problem here with cost of housing isn't greedy landlords; it's the cost of the asset itself.
Right. The development of this too doesn't pencil to create more supply at the lower levels at all, so it becomes a big issue. And I look at the cash flow piece of this, and you're giving up cash flow now for equity growth in the future in California primarily. So if you're a cash flow investor, it's not necessarily your cup of tea, but look at the growth that you get. You can't argue with that growth. I debated with a good friend of mine about multifamily investing in California, and he won because I couldn't help it. I was like, I can't invest in communism. I can't do messing around. And he's like, no, you don't understand. Their rent rules on rent controls actually help my rents rise more. And you look at the values of the rent increases along with the values of the property increases over time, and they make it a very good environment long term to hold, where maybe year one you're not doing well. And I look at the opportunity in California right now for multifamily or residential housing to try to add additional dwelling units on some of these houses. I know a couple of my neighbors already. I see duplexes going up, where they're just converting pieces of the housing to duplexes to get more rents out of these things, or add an ADU on the back. And tiny homes and stuff like that are coming out that are becoming more and more friendly. I think a lot of this, and those pencil all day long. If you put a tiny home in your backyard for a couple $100,000, it's going to at least rent for a couple $1,000s a month minimum. And if you're in Newport Beach or something like that, the thing's going for $5,000, $6,000 a month. And so it's really interesting from a cash flow standpoint, some of these value add plays that you can do here.
Totally. Yeah, no, and it is, it's interesting too, all these markets that people were moving to, a lot of my friends moved to, like Austin and Boise, and they're, you talked earlier about the inventory problem. I mean, the inventory is a real problem, and prices are coming down. And we're seeing that in a lot of places around the nation. We're not seeing it so much in California. I'm a California fan, but I do serve, my company serves the nation, and, they're all good markets. But like you said, all real estate is local at the end of the day, especially around that inventory and the rest. There's not a lot of places in the world you can live. I just visited New Zealand, where you can go from, the mountains and skiing, and the ocean and surfing, and hang out in a desert, and whatever, all in the same day. I grew up in San Luis Obispo, and
Nice.
living in San Luis, on a summer day, you got to pick your temperature. In San Luis, it'd be 85. You could drive to Morro Bay on the coast, it would be 65, or you could drive up to Paso Robles, both 15, 20 minutes away, and it was
Nice.
105 at the lake. And so do you want 105 at the lake? Do you want 85 in town, or do you want 65 at the beach?
That's
And like, where in the world can you do that?
this is the reason why it's hard for me to leave California, because it's like the weather is perfect all year round, and I get to mess with my friends in the Midwest and the South, where I'm on Zoom video meetings in the dead heat of winter when it's snowing there, and I'm in Palm Springs at my mom's house on a Zoom meeting going, I'm at the pool, guys, what's going on? They hate me for it, and you can't. I invest primarily out of state, but at the same time, or out of California. But trust me, when I look back at the pricing and the values of these things, I wish I would have been pulling the trigger here in California quite a bit from an equity growth standpoint, because of that exact thing that you're talking about. And I think it's important, like you said, you were able to kind of see the writing on the wall in 2007, 8, and 6 and 8 in that period of time. And what are you seeing now, or what things are you really trying to pay attention to as far as data and metrics to kind of do your best to time the market as much as you possibly can and really be able to set your investment strategy, I'd say, moving forward?
So, for me personally, the number one thing I look at is just that cap rate, that return on investment, right? I do think at some point, if we keep, just basic good governance, which I think we're largely, a lot of people would disagree. I think we're largely doing today. Interest rates are coming down. We're making small incremental progress. Like I said, I would have hit the economy a little harder earlier if I was in charge,
Yeah.
and broke that inflation faster. I would put more money into supply chain. I'd be a little less, I'd back off on the tariffs,
Yeah.
overseas, and I think we could address inflation. But I don't think either party is going to do that set of things. Neither party has that as part of their platform. So, I don't expect any of those things to happen. So I hope we continue to make slow progress on inflation. But I expect this is kind of the new normal for a while until our next crisis.
So you're
And
thinking stagflation is here to stay for a little bit, and you're going to see some inflation with, asset values kind of slowly rising or kind of breaking even for a period of time, adjusted for inflation, you think?
I think that's a pretty reasonable bet. And I think, though, because we're the world's reserve currency, all of that looks a little better here than it does, elsewhere. Right? Whenever you go start to, say, oh, inflation's terrible here, just go search inflation in the G20 countries, like, or any of these different stats, growth, GDP growth, et cetera, for how bad we're doing or how good we're doing. You got to look at what's
The whole
happening,
picture.
right?
Right.
And what's happening in that whole picture. So I think that's going to be, that's my best guess. Who knows, after the election, we can get some crazy policies going. If we stay the course, I think that's what will happen. If we change leadership and give both the House and Senate, which I think is unlikely that all three go to one party, but if that did happen and went to the Republican Party, I think for sure we will lose our status as the world's reserve currency over 4 years.
Right. Uh,
Um,
Yeah, and
and I won't get into the there's a lot. That's a technical statement, not a political statement.
and
There's a lot
it's hard. It's hard because from right now, usually on election years, no matter who this is going to win or not, there's some calm before the storm that occurs, so that way the politicians can blame the next guy that comes in if they do lose, and things like that. I think we ought to be really paying attention to policy, like you're talking about, and saying where are their incentives and what are they talking about trying to accomplish, and not only what are they talking about, what are they actually doing at the same time too, because they're completely different things no matter who's in power. And so
right.
being able to understand those data metrics, pay really close attention to jobs, look at your numbers in your different markets around the country as far as the job growth in those particular markets, the vacancy rates, the foreclosure rates, time on the market, all these types of metrics to make sure you're ahead of the curve, right?
So given that, so my whole thesis and most of my talks is that we're basically a crisis economy. So the question really to me is what's the next crisis and what's the outcome of that crisis? And so there's two possibilities in my mind, and this is what we should all be planning for. Make the most, like you just said, make the most of today and all the minor metrics and what's going on in my market. Perfect, right? But what you really want to be thinking about is that next crisis and what's the likely outcome. There's two ways that goes to me, right? The way it's gone for all of our, past crises is we throw more money at it, and and we lower rates. And so then it's an amazing time to refinance. I'm on the record 2020 after the pandemic of saying I think it's more likely we'll see rates starting with a 2 or a 1 than it is we'll see rates starting with a 6. I clearly got that wrong because we've been over 6, 7%. And, I didn't think rates would increase this much. But I do think the next time we have a crisis, we don't have a functioning government. the fiscal policy. So we only have monetary policy, and the Fed only has two things, right? Stimulus and rates. And so the only way they can help us out of a crisis is those two things. So very likely we see low rates and lots of stimulus, even if the Fed has to buy those mortgage-backed securities to make it happen because nobody else wants to touch them. So that's possibility number one. What would be the case the Fed wouldn't do that? Inflation's too high. So this is where I would have broken the back of inflation much sooner, much harder, you know, than I think the Fed maybe become a little too political and didn't want to go as hard as fast under Trump as they
Right.
should have. And
Yeah,
then
they didn't want to show losses on that side, and you know, you see it
so
happening, you know, consistently like this, where you know, they don't do the right actions soon enough, and they're always doing them after the fact that's needed. And you know, they printed so much money. Was it like 40% of the money supply in existence they printed during that period of time? And you know, that's going to take years you know, trickle out unless you do that hard stop that you're talking about. You know, and it's scary.
So, and I think it might have been the right amount had we not had, you know, tax cuts, tariffs, and a reduction of the supply chain at the same time. To put all those things together, and yeah, I mean that is how we ended up in this inflationary
Right.
environment. So that's one possibility, right? And so we get that chance to refinance. We get the chance to take these things that we buy right now that are maybe finding those mispriced assets and getting into better terms on those. So that's personally kind of the path I'm going down. Inflation's too high, they don't do that. Boy, then it gets pretty ugly, right? We have a pretty ugly downturn from
Right.
the next crisis. And there's lots of things, you know. Pandemic's one of them, cybersecurity events. AI is, you know, it is the internet was a black swan. AI is a black swan. It's going to have big unintended consequences we haven't figured out yet. So there's stuff coming, and you know how we react to that next crisis is really going to be the biggest question.
Yeah, I think that AI thing is going to be so big that people don't see it. I mean, you look at how the iPhone changed society, for example, and you know, this is bigger than that, you know, in my opinion, based on what I'm seeing even in my own industry, as ways to automate aspects of your business and streamline things and not utilize and need people as much anymore and make things 10 times easier. You still, like, we're literally thinking about having someone, you know, look at AI techniques consistently within your business, because if you don't do that, you're going to be left in the dust. There's going to be too much competition going the other way, and so you have to become a major student in that space to survive, in my opinion, in the future. And so that's a major black swan that I think is going to be, you know, catch a lot of people by surprise, you know. So
Yeah. And you know, the internet was that. You know, Blockbuster doesn't exist anymore, right?
right.
Netflix mailing CDs doesn't. Netflix made the transition from CDs to streaming, right? Blockbuster didn't make the transition from stores to streaming, right? So AI is going to kill certain businesses, kill certain jobs, and create a lot of others, just like
Yeah.
the internet did. And you want to be on the right side of that for sure.
I
And
just
real
good.
estate investment, you want to be on the right side of that. Like San Francisco, everybody's shitting on San Francisco. It's freaking booming right now, like some of the fastest growth in the nation
Interesting.
because of AI. It's the home of AI. 38% of all seed capital in the world went to Bay Area firms last year.
Wow, that's insane. You know, you speak about the new jobs getting created. I literally just saw an article the other day where IKEA is paying people $16 an hour to serve meatballs in their virtual reality space. And I was like, what? What? You know, it's just insane. I'm like, who's buying meatballs in this place to where there's $16 an hour is making it profitable enough to make that work in a virtual reality space? I'm going, this is but it doesn't make sense to pay $16 an hour at a real restaurant or a real fast food place. You know, it's like, it's just unbelievable. It makes me laugh, but you know, it is what it is. You know, so well, this has been awesome, Sean. I really appreciate the insight and the knowledge on these different, you know, metrics and how you see the economy playing out. So if anybody wants to reach out and, you know, get a hold of you or understand what kind of data you can help them with, where can they go to find you and find out out, get some help?
Well, Property Radar is the most powerful real estate search engine ever built, over 250 criteria. We recently figured out we have over a Google worth of possible search combinations. That's Googol, not Google, the company. And that's a very large number. So please check that out. You can find me on Facebook and LinkedIn and all the usual places. And I'm easy to find because I was on all of them early. So I'm usually Sean O'Toole or Sean P. O'Toole.
Awesome. Thank you. And if you guys want to get a hold of me, you can go to MathewOwens.com with one T in Matthew. We have due diligence checklists. We have quick analysis sheets on there. We have master classes all for free for people. So if you guys want information or free education, go ahead and go to MathewOwens.com. Thanks so much, Sean. I really appreciate it. And we'll definitely have you on again soon. I appreciate all the commentary today.
Thanks.
Do you want to learn how to create financial freedom in your life through real estate and take your investing business to the next level? If so, you can follow us in one of the following ways. First, you can take one of our free webinars on how to analyze property, how to raise capital for real estate, and how to market and find deals. 3 of the key pillars to becoming a successful real estate investor. Number 2, you can join us on our mailing list where you'll get tips and tricks on real estate investing directly to your inbox. And number 3, you can take our 6-month real estate course that teaches you every aspect of real estate investing you can think of, and more importantly, create financial freedom in your life through real estate investing strategies that I teach. If you want a master's in real estate in 6 months, this course is for you. We're going to go over how to raise money, promissory notes, syndications, fixing and flipping, buy and hold investing, tax and legal structures, self-directed retirement accounts, financial education, how to run a business, how to market and find your deals, and most importantly, how to create that financial freedom in your life so that you can stop trading your time for money and create passive real estate cash flow that you can live off of. If you're interested, go ahead and click on one of the links below, and I look forward to seeing you guys on the other side.